start again? Good morning, everybody in Europe. Good afternoon to those who are listening to us in China. Welcome to USME Center webinar series today on how to comply with company reporting rules in China. My name is Ludmila Hiklova and I am a legal advisor here in USME Center in Beijing. We have selected today's topic because from our own experience, this topic is not very often covered by presentations or the seminars, but a lot of companies, either they are already here established in China or whether they are thinking about establishing company in China, sooner or later they will come into the contact with various reporting duties and authorities. To set up company in China is a highly demanding process and many foreign investors feel relieved once this phase is behind them. However, from an administrative point of view, the daily life of a company is not easy and straightforward either, especially when it comes to the compliance requirements. Before we go to the topic, let me first say a few words about our USME Center to explain a little bit what services we provide to those who are listening to us for the first time. USME Center is a project financed by the European Union, and our aim and goal and purpose is to help small and medium-sized companies from the European Union to invest and export their products, services and technology to China. We exist since 2010. And we are supported by 6 implementing partners. We are European chambers. You see their logos on the screen. We are assisting companies in different areas in business development, legal and tax, advisory, standards and conformity, and HR questions. One technical point on your screens, you have a panel and then you have a small window which says questions in the title. So if you have any question during the webinar or at the end of the webinar, please write it. My colleagues will answer you on technical questions, or we will answer you at the end of the questions. Our speaker will answer you your questions to the topic in the last 5 minutes of our webinar. So now let me warmly welcome our today's speaker, Mrs. Yang Yuhua. Mrs. Yang Yuhua is a partner in Link's law offices. She's a very experienced lawyer and has a rich experience working for law firms in different jurisdictions in London and New York, Hong Kong and Beijing. And her specialization is cross-border international practice, capital markets and the corporate finance, mergers and acquisition. She focuses on private equity and venture capital, international trade, and is assisting and advising both to Chinese and foreign clients. So Mrs. Yang Yuhua, welcome, and I will give a floor to you, and please introduce us what we will be speaking about today.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. And good afternoon and good morning to all the participants. Today our time is still limited, and so I will focus on the most important areas, I think, for the people from outside of China want to do business in China. And I think we will have a report, might be published later, so that will contain more details. And I know those topics, when you encounter any problem in the practice, is very, there are some difficulties, but when you go through them comprehensively, it's quite tedious and boring. So I try to not bore everybody in this audio seminar. And so today, our agenda, basically, I will only cover 5 main most important areas. The first to explain a little bit which foreign invested entities have to report in China, to clarify some legal terms, normally confusing to the foreign investors. And then we'll talk about the regular reporting, basically the annual report and the continuous disclosure obligations for the company operating in China. So the third topic will be the reporting of the changes. So if there is any major change, apart from doing the major change abroad, your investee companies in China need to report to the authority and make the relevant registration or the filings. And the fourth one will be very important, tax registration and reporting. And the last one will be the foreign exchange and customers reporting, because here the foreign exchange control. So understand how to handle the foreign exchange issue will be critical for the day-to-day operating, including the trade and investment for the foreign investors. Okay, so I will start from explaining the different types of the foreign invested companies. And we can categorize it from the two different angles. One is to categorize it from the capital ownership. So that's normally referred in the practice in China. The top one is called WFIE. It's a wholly foreign-owned entity, basically 100% the equity invested and owned by the foreign company. The second time, we call it an equity joint venture. And that means the Chinese party, normally selected by the foreign party, will form a legal entity, and the Chinese and the local Chinese party will invest jointly into this joint venture. So that's called equity joint venture. The third one is called a cooperative or contractual joint venture. We call it a CGV. Comparing to EGV, CGV will offer more flexibility for the foreign and Chinese party in this joint venture. Basically, the CGV, you can understand it. I personally prefer to call it a contractual joint venture. That means the operation, or you call it the constitution of the joint venture, is governed by the contract. You can have a lot of contractually negotiated terms and to put in the CGV's constitutional document, or we call it a CGV contract, to govern how the joint venture is going to operate, and the foreign and the Chinese parties' relevant rights and obligations and responsibilities. So most of the terms are contractually agreed between the foreign and Chinese party. That's the main characters comparing to the EGV. And the fourth one is called a foreign invested partnership, because the PRC partnership law has been published for a few years, and the partnership is has some unique tax implications. So the foreign invested partnership has been one of more commonly used legal organization in China. So the very last one is called a representative office. We have to put a little star on the top left corner, and that's to emphasize the representative office, or we call it a rep office. It's not an independent legal entity. It is registered in China, but it is not an independent legal entity in China. Basically, the rep office, literally speaking, as what is called, is a rep office, or is a branch office of the headquarter. Basically, if you are a British company or if you are a French company, you set up a representative office in China. The parent company or the headquarter, either somewhere in England or in France, will be responsible for all the legal liabilities and civil liabilities. So the rep office in China is not an independent legal entity. That's the most important thing to remember. So in terms of the form is more about the liabilities. So how the company will bear the liabilities in terms of the extent of the liability to the third party. So if it's a limited liability company, like normally the EGV and the CGV can be a limited liability company. So there, the company's liability will only be, the company will only be exposed to the subscribed capital. So for instance, if the company's registered capital, which is a subscribed capital, is 1 million, and then your liability to the debtor or to any third party will be limited to that 1 million. And then the second time, we'll call it a limited liability by shares or limited liability by stock. The only difference between this one and the top one is only the second one will be eligible to apply to be listed on the stock market. So normally the larger companies, and to have a higher threshold for the capital, they will be eligible to be changed from limited liability company to the limited liability by shares or by stocks. I think for the small and medium companies, normally they will adopt limited liability. You can put the abbreviation like LLC as a commonly used legal form for your either WFIE or the EGV or the CGV. And the third type will be the partnership. That will be the corresponding legal form to the foreign invested partnership. Basically, the partnership itself is not a legal entity to report to the tax authority. So the partnership wouldn't be levied by the tax straight away. So it's the partners to be levied by the relevant tax.
And before we go to the regular reporting, we would like to launch a first poll of today. And the question is to get your ideas, your opinion about what is the most challenging aspect of company administrative and reporting duties. And you see the question already on your screens, and you have 4 options: change of registration, annual report, tax registration and reporting, or foreign exchange. So which of those you think is the most challenging for the companies to report? What creates the most problems, where are a lot of misunderstandings, mistakes, penalties? And we can see the votes coming. Give you a few more seconds for the voting. And well, we close the polls now and share the results with you. And we can see that 35 of you think that the most difficult is change of registration. No one voted for the annual report. And 55% of you were for the tax registration and reporting, and 10% for the foreign registration. Mrs. Yang Yihua, what your experience says?
Well, I do agree with most of the participants who have participated in the polls. And in the real practice, we have seen a lot of problems, both on the tax registration and reporting and the change of the registrations. I think these polls are very accurate. I think the following slides and the following information might cover some of the questions. But in practice, the tax is the most important thing, and we will talk about it a bit later, and the change of the registration as well. So I think I will carry out, because that will answer most of the questions. So for the annual reporting, I've put a picture that's a screen print from the internet. So you can see I put the website, well, you can see the website, but unfortunately at the moment, I think there's only Chinese language available. So this system, we call it the enterprise, the online enterprise credit information disclosure system. So it's actually is an online system by the State Administration for Industry and Commerce. We call it SAIC. At the central government, they launched this online system. Basically, it's an online system for the company's registry authority in China. So the general public will have access to retrieve and check some public records of all the registered companies in China. So those informations, the database has been managed by SAIC centrally in Beijing, but at the left you can see, well, if you can read some Chinese, at the different regions and different provinces, different cities, you can, so there's at least 4 layers if you go down to find the relevant areas which the company is registered. So this is quite a lot of data assembled on this system. At the moment, this system is still relatively new, so we couldn't guarantee, and the authority wouldn't guarantee is 100% accurate and most updated. Sometimes you have to go to the provincial level, but if you have well, if you are doing business in China, some way, either you speak some Chinese or read some Chinese, or you hire an interpreter or the translator or the Chinese staff. So somebody have to be Chinese or using Chinese at native language level to access to this system and to retrieve the relevant information and do some basic company search, which is very important. So that's what I want to emphasize for this slide. Apart from that, the annual self-reporting system has replaced the previous system called annual inspection or annual examination. But in practice, people are still using the old terms when they're saying annual inspection or annual examination, which is fine, which refers to the annual self-reporting as well. So basically, it's like an annual return of annual filing, whatever used in other countries. So that's not something very difficult to understand. You need to remember the time period for the foreign invested entities, especially joint venture UFI and foreign invested partnership. And they need to file their annual report between 1st of January to the end of June each year. And for the representative office, it will be different because the starting time point will be later. It's from 1st of March and end of June. But actually, there's very few companies will file between January to March because you need to get your books, you get your accounts audited first and to get the annual report, to have the audited annual report incorporated in the annual report. So the report, annual report will be submitted via the online system. So for the general public search, you will do the online, just log in and to get into this system. But as a registered company, you have a corporate account. So the people will use your username and password to log in your corporate account to file the report. So the information is publicly accessible. So anything filed in this annual report, and be cautious about what information. If it's really private or something commercially confidential, you might think about before you put into the annual report and get it launched online. Okay, and the content of the annual report, basically what you need to put into the annual report. There are some mandatory items and there are some options. So this slide will cover, this slide has covered the mandatory content. Those informations you must incorporate it into your annual report. So basically I will quickly go through it. The first will be the contact information of the company, the telephone number, the fax number, the website, the address, postcode, etc. Current status of the company. Is the company still in operation, or close for business, or in liquidation? Company's equity investment. Basically, has the company invested to other companies? Have you set up other subsidiaries in China? You need to report it. Subscribed capital shares and actually paid up shares. For instance, if the company's registered subscribed capital shares are 1 million, but actually paid up shares is only 10 yuan, and you have to say it in the annual report, and the dates and the methods of capital contribution. The methods, like if it is cash capital contribution, or if it's a capital contribution by injecting some intangible assets, such as the technology or any other IP rights, or the buildings, the production line, which has to be appraised. There has to be an appraisal report and to show the value of those intangible assets, tangible and intangible or non-cash assets. The shareholders and or shareholding changes has to be filed and contained in the annual report. The company's website and the name, website address, etc. Of the online shop, i.e. the e-commerce. So if it's e-commerce online shop, you need to put more details up how you operate on the internet. And this slide will cover the optional content. So you use your your own discretion about what information you want to release, what you don't want to release. In the practice, a lot of people just skip all those optional items, which means they don't want to disclose how big they are, how many people they have employed in China, the total assets, the total liabilities, the net assets, or the guarantee or undertaking provided, which means contingent liability. The total operating income or the income from the core business, the profit, everything, and the total amount of tax payment. So that will show the really active business operation on the annual basis. A lot of companies, they don't want to disclose those information online, which is fine because that's optional. But if the company has reached a certain size, or if it's a public company, obviously it's not optional anymore. Well, there are some, for the rep office, the content of the annual report will be slightly different because we just differentiated the rep office from other types of the foreign invested entities. The legal status of the foreign enterprise, the headquarters, no matter it's in the UK or in France, in Belgium, anywhere. And the business activities carried out by the rep office, most of them will be the liaison with the local business partners, marketing, and attending the relevant exhibitions or the trade missions, something like that. And the fees, revenues, and the expenditures that have been audited by the PRC certified public accountants. And the disclosure on the online portal within 20 days, that's the continuous disclosure obligations. So those informations, here. The information on the capital subscribed and paid up by the shareholders, if there's any change, you need to report it straight away. The dates and methods of the capital contribution, etc. The information on any changes in respect of the shareholders or the shareholding. Sometimes you don't have the change on the shareholders, but you do have the change of the shareholdings, which means A shareholder has transferred some equity interest or the shares to B shareholder, something like that. In the information on the granting, change, and the renewal of administrative license. So if a company has been operating in a regulated in industries sectors, so you have like the medical equipment or something regulated by the government, and you have a license or permit. If that license or permit has expired, you have to renew it, and you have to report that renewed or newly issued license. The information on the registration of the IP rights pledge. So if the company has a patent granted and the company has pledged the patent to the third party as a security for a loan, for a bank loan, or for the security to guarantee the performance of the debt to a creditor, you have to register such a pledge to make it effective, and so the general public will have access to those information. And the information on the administrative penalties, which means basically referring to the companies have been imposed with fines, and then you have to report it. Other information that shall be disclosed in accordance with law. That's very general.
So it did just raise my curiosity. So does it mean that if the authorities give my company any penalty, I have to report about myself?
Yeah. Well, there's a particular section on this online system. If the company has if the company has produced some pollution to the environment, to the river, to the water, or to the air, has exceeded the local limits published by the local government, they have, well, in that case, they have to be, the local government will take some action. So basically, you will receive administrative fines, and then you have to report it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Actually, very relevant to the current situation, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, that's the penalties. Failure to disclose the annual report or information online, or basically if you're hiding the truth or practice of a fraud, and that will result in penalties, including there is a public naming and shaming list, the restriction or the market entry bans on the company, administrative and criminal penalties sometimes when this is very extreme scenario, and payment of civil damages and or the banning of the legal representative for two years. So here we underscore the legal representative because the legal representative is in China is registered. So a particular person in charge of the company in China, the head of the local companies registered in China, will be personally banning for 2 years to serve on any senior management position. So that needs to be emphasized. It's not only the corporate liability, it's personal liability as well. For the rep office, the penalty will be more specific. Order to submit or rectify the report, a fine of renminbi 10,000 to 30,000 for failing to submit the report on time, or a little bit more, 20,000 to 200,000 renminbi for hiding the truth or providing false information, or the revocation of the registration certificate, which means the certificate, the registration will be revoked.
Now we are moving to the reporting of changes, but before we start this part, we would like to launch our second poll. And we already know what you think about difficulties in reporting, which part you consider the most difficult. But now we would like to know your experience, whether you have ever faced difficulties with authorities when reporting about your company operation, whether it is about taxation, annual report, foreign exchange reporting. So the question is, have you ever faced difficulties with authorities when reporting about your company operation? And the option is no, I have never had any difficulties. Second option, yes, minor ones. And third one is yes, and it took us more time to sort it out. And we see your votes coming.
It's quite obvious.
Yeah. Okay, so a few more seconds. And fine, so we close and share the results with you. And it shows that more than half of those who voted had a problem with authorities about the reporting issues, like 56% of them, followed by 25% minor ones, and 20% had no difficulties at all. So I think these results showing that our webinar is well placed, and
that's very realistic, I have to say.
Yeah, and I hope that the information which we present today will help.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think there is no straight answer to address those realities, problem. And unfortunately, the Chinese government is an institutional problem. The whole system is now very investor friendly or business friendly. The public officials or the public officers, in terms of the category, they are the public servant, but they're not really public servant. So they're not that helpful if they're, well, it doesn't matter if they're friendly or not, but sometimes they're not helpful. They're just creating more problems and creating more difficulties, which they don't see the problem.
Yeah.
That's not facilitating the business.
It's not necessary. Yeah.
No, okay, we'll carry out to finish our slides, I think. The change of registration for the foreign invested companies, you have to apply either at the central level, the State Administration for Industry and Commerce, or the local AIC. I think most of you will deal with the local AIC either in Beijing, Tianjin, Shanghai, or even the second tier or the third tier cities. For the change of registration, if there are changes to the name of the company, the address, the legal representative, which is a natural person, has to be John Smith or somebody. It could be a Chinese person as well. The scope of business, the enterprise type, which means if you change your enterprise type from limited liability company to limited liability company by shares or stock, that's a change of the enterprise type. If there's any change to the total investment and registered capital, if there's any change to the term of operation, the change to the equity changes, like a shareholder or shareholding changes, the branch office changes, the directors, supervisors, or managers, but that's only for the record filing. You don't need to get a new certificate. That's record filing only. So for the rep office, if there's any change to the name of the rep office, to the address, to the chief representative, and to the scope of business, the term of operation, the parent company, i.e. the headquarters, that has to be registered. If the rep office has more than one representative, then you will have one chief representative and you will have ordinary representative or ordinary representatives. In that case, the change to the ordinary representative need to be filed, but not change of registration. Basically, you wouldn't have a new registration certificate.
Okay, if I understood it correctly, there is a difference between the filing and the change of the registration.
Basically, the change of registration means all the registered items appearing on the certificates or any permits. So in that case, if there's any change, you have to register them and to get a renewed license or the certificate. But if it's not something, because an ordinary representative's office, the names wouldn't appear on the certificate. So you only need to file with authority, but you don't need to register the change. That's the difference. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so for some of the changes, you have to go through a pre-approval from the approving authority. That's the MOFCOM, the Ministry of Commerce, and the local counterpart of the MOFCOM. So normally the change to the shareholders, investors, or the shareholding, or the change to the registered capital, to the business scope, term of operation, branch offices, or any change to the rep office, you have to go through the pre-approval from MOFCOM. That's a different sector within the government. So that's a little bit more complicated for the foreign investors, because normally you think you deal with company registry. If there's any change, you go to register and file the change. But in China, because any foreign investment in China still regulated by the government, so there's a pre-approval procedure. And the content and the procedure. For all the changes of registration applications, the foreign invested entities or the rep office shall submit to AIC application form, which is it is a form nowadays. The form has to be executed by the chairman or the legal representative of the foreign invested company. A resolution of the board of directors or the management body according to the corporate's constitutional document. Normally we call it articles of association of the company. The approval documents issued by the original examination and approval authority for changes to some items, which is MOFCOM or the local counterparts of MOFCOM. The foreign invested entities articles of association, if there have been any change or any changes to the articles of association. So for a more specific list, you can refer to the page 3 to 5 of the report once it's published. The application must be made to AIC within 30 days of the changes being approved by the MOFCOM or the local counterparts of MOFCOM. If not applicable, applications must be made to AIC within 30 days or 60 days in case of rep office. AIC will decide whether to approve the change within 30 days. So normally you can remember, well, if you don't want to remember too much, normally 1 month time period. For rep office, it could be 2 months. And in practice, the AIC has been approving the registration of any changes shorter than 30 days. Very unlikely they will use 30 days. Sometimes in practice I've seen it can be done within 5 working days or 2 weeks or something like that.
Mm-hmm. You have mentioned deadlines, and we will speak about the penalties. You have mentioned as well that some items which are related to the headquarter or to the parent company has to be changed, which means some documents have to be executed or signed somewhere in the Europe. Yeah. And well, there has to be some of them notarized or legalized. and then only afterwards sent to the authorities. Are the authorities flexible in this aspect? Do they take into the account that the headquarters is far away and then the procedures are longer?
Yeah, unfortunately, they're not very flexible. And because any document, say if it's a decision made by a parent company, it's a board resolution, or is something certified by the corporate secretary, a document showing the change or the decision has been made abroad, outside of China, they do need to see something legalized, finally legalized by the Chinese embassy or the Chinese consulate residing in the foreign country, where the document was produced. So 30 days or 60 days, normally people think is quite a lot of time to do it. And sometimes we received the instructions from the client saying, well, the chairman retired at early this month, so we need to file the registration of the change of the legal representative by the end of this week or something. It can't be done because the legalization process will take a month sometimes. So there's no time. You definitely will miss the deadline. I can tell the client straight away. And the legalization process has been very confusing and very puzzled, But the thing is, you have to do it. There are various terms they have been using, which is more confusing. When they're talking about notarization, certification, authentication, legalization, they're talking one thing. If it's the document produced outside of China, for instance, in the UK, if it's something, a public record, you can retrieve the public record, and then you don't need to get it notarized. You get the public office or the officer to certify this is a true copy of the public record, and then you can bring that to the Chinese embassy or the Chinese consulate to apply for authentication or legalization. They will give you a form, and if it's really needed, you can go to an agent, a handling agent, try to get it done, because the Chinese embassies or the Chinese consulate abroad, outside of China, my experience, they're not very efficient, and their requirements of the documentation are not very clear. Sometimes the English version is not updated. So sometimes it will incur a little bit more cost, but not much. But if you get an agent to do it, it might be quicker and to make sure you don't need to go back and forth. And the Chinese consulate, normally they don't do the accelerated application, even you pay more. Their accelerated process still take 3 working days or 4 working days. So do give it 1 or 2 weeks to do it, and be careful not to miss the deadline for 30 days or 60 days. So be careful with if anybody tell you either your staff in China or your lawyer or the accountants tell you some documents need to be notarized or certified or legalized. Be careful with that process. It could be time consuming. Yeah. So we will carry out the changes to our registration item without registering the change. You will get a warning, and they might confiscate the illegal gains, and there are fines, and the order to complete the change of registration formalities. If the foreign invested entity or the rep office still fails to complete the change of registration formalities, your business will be suspended, and the business license or the registration certificate might be withheld or even revoked. So that's the consequences. More than that, sometimes in practice, if the company is in the bank facilities, if you need financing, if your public record shows, you have your business suspended, or the certificate withheld or expired or revoked, basically you are dead. You couldn't do any more business. And so we'll go straight to the very technical bit, the tax and the foreign exchange, which are critical, extremely critical. And first of all, you have to register. Once the company is set up, you have to, basically, if it's a foreign invested entity, you will get a business license. If it's a rep office, you will get a registration certificate. Once you have obtained the certificate or the business license, you shall register with a state administration for tax. We call it SAT, or the local counterpart, within 30 days. The change of registration, if there is any change, so the change of registration in China will include the change to be made with the AIC system, equivalent to the company's registry system. And if there's any change to that, you have to change the tax registration as well. So that's a 30 days time period to be given. And so if there's any change to the name, to the address, to the legal representative, to the shareholders or the bank account, if you fail to do that, the penalties will be the failure to update the tax registration information will trigger the fines of up to renminbi 10,000. Not much, but it will affect your tax reporting straight away. And the taxpayers engaging in business operations shall set up their accounting books within 15 days. That's very short. The government wants, the tax authority wants you to set up your books straight away. And the taxpayers shall report to their accounting policies and accounting software to tax authorities for the record within 15 days. Same, they want it to be done straight away. And the penalties will be up to 10,000 renminbi, which is not much, but that will affect the operation of the company, undoubtedly. If the accounting books are not set up or the account records are not truthful, the tax authorities may levy discretionary taxes, which is definitely something you don't want to see. The VAT filings are done monthly on the 15th day of the following month. Please note the VAT filings must be submitted monthly, even if there's no tax payment to be made. The penalty will be the late payment and the failure to regularly file taxes, fine up to 10,000 renminbi. Please note the above late payment fees and the penalties for late filing also apply to other taxes, so we're not going to repeat them.
I have a question which is related to the VAT, which you have just spoken about. Since a couple of years, I think 2 or 3 years, there is a reform in China where the business tax is replaced by the VAT. How this one is reflected in the reporting, will somehow
yes, and
influence the reporting duties?
Yeah, it's still ongoing. You don't need to worry too much because the tax authority will be very specific. They will tell you your local accountants or your local finance manager or the local staff very clearly on what kind of payment or on what kind of income you need to pay what kind of a tax. So ultimately, in the future, the business tax will be completely abolished. It will be replaced by the VAT completely. But at the moment, it's still in the transition or call it a reform period. So for some services, it will be subject to the VAT. For some services, it's still business tax. And the different provinces or the different cities is still different. So there is no general answers to say what kind of business will be levied by business tax or what kind of income or the revenue will be levied by VAT. But be careful. But you shouldn't pay both VAT and business tax because both of them are kind of a turnover tax based on the turnover. So you only pay one for one type of business activities. Yeah. Okay. So we go to the corporate income tax. The corporate income tax is reported provisionally on a quarterly or monthly basis according to the quarterly monthly P&L, that's profit and loss statement. For small and medium companies and the rep office, the filing is normally on a quarterly basis. For the bigger companies, it will be on a monthly basis. Same as before, the tax authority, your specific governing tax authority will tell you very specifically. They're very good, clearly telling you, and you need to do it on a quarterly or monthly basis. The filing due date is the 15th day, the same thing. For so the finance manager or the finance staff in your company will be very busy at around the second week of each quarter of the month. The annual CIT, annual corporate income tax filing, shall be done before the deadline of 31st May the following year. So it's not end of June, it's end of May. Please remember it. The content of the CIT filing, either the quarterly or the monthly report, will have to incorporate the balance sheet, the profit and loss statement. The annual report will have both the balance sheet, the profit and loss statement, and the cash flow statement, a statement of changes in owner's equity. Owner's equity refers to the net assets, basically the shareholders' equity interest. So the annual report, you have two more statements. The annual corporate income tax report must be audited by a Chinese CPA. The individual income tax filing. Employers withhold individual income tax for employee, basically the wages and the salaries, and pay taxes on their behalf. Employers must submit a detailed individual income tax filing with tax authority, listing each employer's gross salary income and the liability amount. That need to be reported on a monthly basis before the due date of the 15th of each month. For individuals with annual income over RMB 120,000, the annual self-reporting is required by 31st of March of the following year. And that's something need to be done by the employee or by the individual themselves. That is not the company's liability or the company's responsibility to do that.
We are talking about the employees, but some foreigners they are here in China doing a freelancer job, or they are independent contractors. How this IIT, individual income tax filing, apply to them?
Yeah, that's a very good question, I think, because for the small and medium companies, when they are doing business in China, some of our clients, they are reluctant to hire a lot of employees by themselves, and it's difficult, and the termination will be more difficult given the new employment contract law became effective a few years ago, and it's very costly to terminate and to fire a staff. If you are not doing it properly, you might get involved with dispute and even arbitration and litigation, which is no good. So some small and medium companies, they are more inclined to use the freelancer or the outside counsel, independent contractors to carry out some of the business on their behalf, or basically hired by the company, but not as an employee, but as a contracted person. So you have that kind of individual, although they are not employees of the company, you need to pay them, pay the consulting fee or something, any service payment to those people. The company is obliged to withhold the personal individual income tax as well. Mm. Okay, we'll talk about the withholding tax for the overseas payment. Because in terms of foreign invested companies, there is a nature of the company's business. They will be related to either the parent company or the affiliated companies abroad. So there will be a lot of payment to be made abroad, either for the purchase of the service or the goods, or to pay the loyalty fees or something. The domestic taxpayers have withholding obligation for VAT or business tax and CIT, the corporate income tax, for the following cross-border transactions and obligations. You pay service fees, royalties, rents, interest, dividends, and withholding tax. Withholding tax is not one type of tax. The relevant will be the turnover, like VAT or business tax and corporate income tax.
Does it happen, for example, that the authorities, they will reject overseas payments or the?
Well, this slide I put here. Normally, if the payment is under 50,000 US dollars at the moment, it's difficult to find it in the black letter law. It's policy oriented. This is a threshold. Basically, if a payment is big, and the authority, the tax authority and the foreign exchange authority will be more careful to review to make sure it's a genuine, authentic transaction. to make the payment. So they need you to provide more document to substantiate and prove this is a proper transaction. So the payment to made to the foreign party or the foreign companies is appropriate payment. If it's a small amount, under 50,000 US dollar equivalent, no matter it's euros or dollars, Hong Kong dollars, sterlings, and normally they are more relaxed. But if it's a big amount, they are very difficult, and they will keep requesting the documentations for those transactions. So the domestic taxpayer, they shall register or file the relevant contracts with the tax authority within 30 days of the conclusion of the contract. Basically, after the contract is signed and when the payment obligation is triggered. The tax authorities will then assess the withholding obligation based on the nature of the overseas payment, and the domestic taxpayers are obliged to pay the withholding tax the following months after payment. Only when you have obtained the tax clearance certificate or the record, the foreign exchange authority will approve the exchange. Basically, you can buy the foreign currency by using your renminbi. Otherwise, you couldn't do the payment at all. That's how the whole mechanism, that's how does it work. And so the foreign exchange registration, and that's related. Sometimes the foreign exchange and tax, they're always related because the government, they put it's like a gateway. You have to make sure it's tax cleared, and then they will approve you to buy the foreign currency, and then you can make the payment. The foreign exchange, the Forex registration, you have to do it with, to submit the approval certificate, the business license, sometimes the EGV or the CGV contract and article of association, and sometimes the bank will require some documents as well. Why is it required by the bank? Because the new system now, the foreign exchange authority have delegated some of their power or their administrative duties to we call it a foreign designated bank. The bank will work as kind of a front office for the foreign exchange authority, and basically the bank will require their clients to produce some of the documents and then to get the registration done for their clients. So the reporting, the foreign invested companies, they need to, by the end of September each year, to report on the domestic and overseas investments from the preceding year on the online information system. Normally the companies, the foreign invested companies, accounting staff, they will be trained and very familiar with that reporting obligations. The penalties, a fine of no more than 30% of the amount of the illegal purchased foreign exchange. Why is called illegally purchased foreign exchange, which means you haven't got approval from the foreign exchange authority or hasn't got it registered properly, and then it will be called or categorized as illegal purchased foreign exchange. In serious cases, a fine equivalent to the amount of the illegal purchased foreign exchange, and if it's really a big amount, a criminal liability will be triggered. And so at the end, I will put the summary or what's the best practice. That's very practical tips. I hope is helpful to everybody. And make sure you always have the physical control of the company's shops and the business license, certificate, registration, and some of the companies and their local staff, if there's any problem or dispute with the local staff, we used to have this extreme situation. The local staff have taken all the books and the records and the certificate and the registration documents and the chops, corporate chop, the finance person's personal chops, stamps, everything. And then the company's business is absolutely jeopardized. So remain physical control and put it in a safe custody with someone. The registration and record filing information of foreign invested companies will be published online and be available to the general public. So be careful about the data protection, the corporate secret, the commercial secrets, and the information submitted to the public authorities need to be consistent. Any inconsistency, if there is any investigation conducted by the professionals, you will have trouble. If the company applying for tax incentives, special reorganization treatment, or accelerated depreciation, as most of them were related to the preferential tax treatment, approval from the tax authority or record filing prior to annual corporate income tax filing is needed. Otherwise, you couldn't enjoy those preferential treatment. That's important. And the compliance with foreign exchange formalities, it is important. Sometimes when transferring funds outside of China, you have to make sure the formalities are satisfied, and you don't want any funds to be trapped inside of China.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Yang Yuhua. We have received from you quite a lot of questions, and Mrs. Yang will try to reply to some of them. We will see how much time we will have to reply to them. In the meantime, when Mrs. Yang is reading the replies, I would like to bring to your attention several events and publications which our center is planning for the near future. We have recently published our diagnostic kit. It's volume 2 about ways of market entry to China. We have updated as well knowing your business partner, so you can download it from our websites free of charge. We have published as well several case studies on relocating office in China or setting up a retail business. This Friday, if you are in Shanghai, it happens that you will be on a business trip in Shanghai on August 28th, and there is a USME conference specifically focused on HR and financial issues, and it's still open for the registration. A little bit further in the future, in November 18 to 20 in Beijing, there is a big international fair and exhibition called World of the Food, and USME Center will have its pavilion there. So if you are interested to advertise and to be present at this exhibition, you are very welcome to contact our colleagues. The contacts you will find on our websites. So now I will give microphone back to Mrs. Yang.
Yeah. Okay, I got 4 questions, and I think some of them are pretty easy. The first question has been raised. Can I confirm that I need to report on the online portal within 20 days each time one of the listed situation arises? Yes. But in practice, you can try to assemble some of the changes and try to do it within one go. But be careful, because the online portal, which means the company will do it online, but at the moment, you still have to hand out the originals to physically in one of the branch offices of AIC. So the online portal, you can do it, but it's not completely online yet. That's the confusing bit. And sometimes some of the changes has to be subject to the annual report. Normally, if the company is in the annual report filing period, the authorities, the AIC will tell you, you do finish the annual report filing first, and then you submit the application for the change later. Another question is, what is the deadline of the annual accounts? I think that refers to the fiscal period. In China, this is statutorily required, the fiscal period from 1st of January to 31st of December. So you couldn't choose your own fiscal year, say, I want to start from 1st of March and ending at the end of February. You can't do it. I'm sorry, not applicable in China. So some of the foreign companies, even the large foreign listed companies, and they're very confusing because they need to comply with their own annual report. Might end up with dated end of September, but here is end of December. So logistically, it's not helpful, but unfortunately, it's not negotiable at all. Another question is, are there any CSR or sustainability reporting requirements for companies in China? The government has been encouraging people to, publish their corporate social responsibility report, but it's not mandatorily required at the moment. You're more than welcome to do it, but it's not required. Last question, can you describe what some of the major differences between Western reporting standard and the Chinese standards? I think that question really refers to the accounting standards. US GAAP, or the international accounting standard, which is not legally recognized in China. There is a Chinese GAAP, that's the Chinese accounting standard, but most of them are very consistent to the US GAAP and the international accounting standard. I'm not the right person to answer that question because I'm a lawyer, I'm not an accountant, but my understanding is they are pretty universal. But in terms of the tax, from the tax perspective, there are a lot of differences.
Thank you very much. We have received some other questions as well, but due to the time, we are not able to answer them. So please, if you are interested in answering your question, go to our websites. There is a function, ask the expert, send the question to us, and we will get back to you. We have tried within this hour, from 4 to 5 Beijing time, cover a lot of topics. We covered about tax and foreign exchange and annual reporting, but it's impossible. There are a lot of duties and there is a lot of what to say. As Mrs. Young mentioned at the beginning, we have drafted, or basically Mrs. Young together with Mr. Rokjal, who is a tax advisor, drafted for USME Center publication called Guideline on Company Administrative and Reporting Duties in China. This report, this guideline, will be published soon. We plan to have it online during the September, and there you will learn all the details and a lot of details, plus the contact information to both experts who drafted this report. At this moment, I would like as well to advertise our future webinar. Next webinar will take place on September 8th, and it will be on product safety and conformity. Again, I think it's Tuesday, so September 8th, on product safety and conformity. I would like to, at this point as well, thank you very much to Mrs. Yang Hua to come today here to the center and give us a presentation from her experience and knowledge. And we hope that we will welcome you often here.
Thank you. I hope everybody will have a better experience doing business in China, and I hope all the difficulties wouldn't frighten the foreign investors. And if you think this is an emerging market, it can generate some profit for you. And I do want to personally encourage people doing it. And more difficulties, if you can overcome those hurdles and the difficulties, and then you deserve the dividends.
Thank you as well to our listeners, to you, to participate in the webinar, and you are welcome not only to participate in other webinars, but as well to connect with us via the website or the call or any other means of communication. Good afternoon and have a good day.